Coming up this weekend at featherweight, this is one of those fights that I can get up for. We have 50K Dan Ige taking on Movsar Evloev, the former champ with M1 Global and an interesting fighter at that. He's 15-0 as a pro. He has many wins that you might recognize, but the real knock against Movsar Evloev is the fact that we don't get to see him often enough. I mean, you look at UFC wins, Sung Woo Choi, Enrique Barzola, who's just doing the damn thing over with Bellator, Mike Grundy, Nick Lentz by split decision. Then his last time out almost a year ago, a big win over Hakeem Dawodu, where he just ground out the great striker. For Movsar Evloev, obviously, we've seen some evolution in his game. We've seen him mix in some little different wrinkles, but you know him for his bread and butter. It is his takedowns. So for 50K Dan Ige, great in the scrambles, and a really speedy fighter. You look at Ige, his biggest win, the win over Edson Barboza is very controversial in a main event. He then goes on to lose to Calvin Kattar, but then he brings it right back against Gavin Tucker and looks amazing in that fight, finishes him. Now he has lost to the Korean Zombie and Josh Emmett in his last two. The fight against Emmett, it wasn't that bad.
He got hit with some big shots.
It was pretty bad. And the fight that he had before that against the Korean Zombie, Zombie worked in his grappling in that one, which was a little bit of a surprise too.
And that's the great thing about Dan Ige. Even when he does lose, you're never looking at that fight being like, oh, he had no success. Or does he really belong in this level?
Fight.
But he was able to be competitive for 25 minutes in a primary boxing fight with another boxer. Like, he didn't get knocked out in the first minute. So this is the weird fight, though. If you look at the odds in this fight, and I know we normally get to it a little bit later, Movsar Evloev is a very big favorite here, if you want to read them.
So he opened to -200, -405 right now. Dan Ige open +170, +304.
So we get fights like this every now and then, where you have someone who's kind of on the outskirts of the rankings, or in that 14 to 15 range, and they're finally getting their big opportunity, and they're going to fight like that top 5 fighter, but also they're going to be a huge favorite going into that fight. Doesn't happen often, but I always remember when Khabib fought Michael Johnson. That was kind of his first introduction to the limelight. Michael Johnson was in the top 5. He was a big favorite going into that. Another one, a more recent example, Khamzat Chimaev versus Gilbert Burns. Like, there is sort of precedence for this in the past, but this is kind of where my question leads to. What has Movsar Evloev done to be justified as such a big favorite over Dan Ige? And I know some people look at Dan Ige and they agree with what you said. He had a close fight with Edson Barboza. A lot of people felt like he lost that fight. He hasn't been able to beat any of the top contenders, even though he has been in there with them. And his biggest win as of late is over Gavin Tucker, who, you know, we like, but let's be honest, Gavin Tucker's not really at the level of some of these other guys. I'm just curious why so many people are confident in Movsar Evloev, a guy who I witnessed with my own 2 eyes get caught in multiple guillotines by Nick Lentz, and they kind of got really scary at a couple points too. Like, I know Evloev is largely, and I don't like saying it this way, I just don't know how to say it, he's kind of credited with ending the career of Nick Lentz. He was able to damage him a lot in that fight, and I know it's a split decision. I'm here to tell you it wasn't. Movsar Evloev beat the brakes off Nick Lentz. It's just Lentz was credited with some of those close guillotine attempts, and that's what the judges saw. But Evloev did make at least a little bit of an evolution with his own striking in that fight, and I think it's going to be interesting to see how much does he strike with a guy like Dan Ige, because Ige is at his most dangerous in that boxing range, but like you said, great with the scrambles, got really good takedown defense himself. I'm just curious, when do you think Evloev goes for a takedown? Is it the first exchange? Do you think he plays around on the feet a little bit? How do you see the early goings of this fight?
Yeah, to me, Evloev's one of those weird cats where we've seen him train at Tiger Muay Thai in the past, kind of like a Piotr Jan, and then making the evolution into the UFC, and what do we get? Well, with Piotr, his ground game's not... I mean, his last time out, it wasn't great.
Pretty good.
He got backpacked, but usually, it's not too bad. Movsar, his striking, it's not great. It's not bad.
Improving.
It's not great, but it is the relentless takedown attempts. It is the pressure. It is the threat of the submission at all times. And again, for Evloev in the UFC, consider this. Sung Woo Choi, decision win. Enrique Barzola, decision win. Mike Grundy, decision win. Nick Lentz, decision win. And it's weird, too, because for a guy who's a grappler, they gave him all good I mean, Sung Woo Choi is what it is. I mean, Sting's good at the feet. He's got some submissions, but that is usually where he lacks. But the other guys, Grundy, good wrestler. Again, in the UFC, it wasn't a great run. Enrique Barzola, like I said, doing it over with Bellator. He's inserted himself into that Grand Prix. And Nick Lentz, I mean, the Carney, he's the guillotine king.
Yes.
Hakeem Dawodu, though, I mean, for Movsar Evloev, what you saw in that fight was, and Matt, I know you talk about it a lot. Okay, both guys are good at striking. One guy might have a slight advantage on the ground. Who's going to break first and go for a takedown? I don't look at it like that in this fight as, okay, well, Movsar can't hang with Dan Ige, so he's got to go for the takedown. I think it's Movsar's so good on the ground, he should take Dan Ige down. He's probably going to take Dan Ige down.
I'm just curious if he does have that kind of a game plan, and if Ige is able to defend some of those takedowns early. I know what Dan Ige looks like in the 5th round of a grueling fight, and he looks pretty much like the fighter who showed up in the 1st round, other than some of the damage he eats. But that's the other thing you have to talk about with Dan Ige. One of the toughest guys to ever fight in this division.
So Dan Ige has 5 more fights than Movsar Evloev. Look at their faces. One guy's been hit a lot more.
But that's the thing about Ige. Like, he ate overhand rights from Josh Emmett. I don't think you understand how crazy of a statement that is. Like, he ate some of the biggest punches this division has to offer his last time out, and that was a pretty close fight he had with Emmett. Emmett definitely won it, but Dan Ige made a fairly good account of himself in some of those boxing exchanges, and that's why I'm curious to see if this fight does make it to the 3rd round. If Ige is able to defend some of those takedown attempts early, I definitely think Ige can outstrike Evloev in the 1st round, but if Evloev's a more tired version of himself, if his hands start to drop and drop and drop, that's when Dan Ige could set up a big shot later on in this fight. I just think this is such a fun fight because Evloev has that eye-catching talent. There's just a few questions we'd love to see get answered, and Dan Ige is the type of opponent who will answer those questions for us.
So we threw it on out to you in the YouTube community tab in saying that, hey, we got to hear from you. What are your thoughts on this one? Bo said, seeing how successful TKZ was against Ige in the grappling department makes me side with Evloev, but I'm definitely not betting on it. Bill saying, I like Evloev because of the ground game. He knows when to mix it in, secure rounds if he can't find a finish. Also, I didn't like Dan Ige's recent performance in the two. Yeah, he's 2-3 in his last 5 fights. What else? Dan Farmer, Evloev easily in the grappling. John saying Evloev probably wrestles him for 2 rounds and barely escapes last round. It's a draw. JB saying Evloev by a mile, and I'll go with one more. Dev the Dude saying easy one, and Artem MMA Analysis, who's always there in the comment section, saying Evloev. So, Matt, fans are with Evloev. He's minus 400 favorite. Pop and popcorn. So,
I don't like the odds.
What is the pick here? Because I do have Movsar Evloev. I think he can mix it in. Again, Korean Zombie for Dan Ige, you're probably thinking I have a grappling advantage here. So if we strike, it is what it is. And then Korean Zombie's taking me down. What's going on? Like that
Korean
one
Zombie did Darce choke Dustin Poirier, though. Like, Korean Zombie can grapple his ass off.
Remember that? Twister.
Because Leonard Garcia, guy who could not grapple. Here's the weird thing about this fight. I'll say this how, like, Teddy Atlas gives his predictions in his podcast. For the odds, I don't think Dan Ige is a bad pick. I'm just going to say that right now. He's fought the way higher level of competition. It's not even close. Whether he's beat them or not, I do not care. He has been in there with some of the best guys in the world, and I really do think that matters. I agree with you, though. I do think if Movsar is able to get that takedown early, there's not much Dan Ige is going to be able to do defensively off his back. I think maybe he can avoid getting submitted like a lot of Movsar's past opponents have been able to, but I do see Movsar being able to go back to the takedown over and over again. Ige might be able to make it more competitive in that 3rd round, but I do like Movsar Evloev in this fight. I'll say this, though. I'm way more excited for this than the main event.
Oh, yeah.
Not even close.
Oh, yeah. Big time featherweight action coming up this weekend. Both of us going with the man who does not possess a nickname, but is a former M1 Global Champion, Movsar Evloev, to get the win. Let us know again down in that comment section. Hit it up, and if you haven't subscribed already, do that, please, because it would mean a lot to the channel, a like as well, but we don't ask for much. We got a big time main event coming up. You shouldn't sleep on it. Volkov taking on Rozenstruik. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, as we always say. Let's get into it.